Wemby on American women. He says, I can't date them. They're too masculine. Paris women are soft and tender. American women remind me of NBA YoungBoy.
Shalom, shalom, shalom. All praises to the Most High, Yahweh, Bahashim, Yahweh Shai. That is to say in the Paleo Hebrew, Yahweh, which is the name of our Heavenly Father, meaning He is. Bahashim, which means in the name. Yahweh Shai, which means He is our salvation. And those are the names of who the world ignorantly calls God, the Heavenly Father, and Jesus, His only begotten Son, who, by the way, only came for the Israelites, which brings us to our discussion/topic this afternoon, okay? The phenom that goes by the name of Victor Wembanyama, if I'm saying that correctly, if you haven't been under a rock and you are somewhat familiar with the sports world, you would know that he is a 7'4", 7'5" center for the San Antonio Spurs, and he's pretty much the next big thing, literally, okay? He made a post recently saying that he cannot deal with American women because they remind him of NBA YoungBoy, all right? Masculine, all right? And we know who he's referring to, the so-called black woman, all right? Because she's the only one that could be referred to or associated with an NBA YoungBoy. And then on the back end of that, he said he would what? Much rather prefer dealing with a Paris woman because why? She's more feminine, all right? She doesn't, run her mouth, all right, as these so-called black American women are notorious for. All right, getting the last word in, yip yapping, running their mouth, nagging, all of that. Okay, and this is a multi-millionaire, early 20-something-year-old, young fellow. Okay, 22, I think, if that. And he would rather deal with a feminine woman. All right, than what? A brolic, combative, brawl type of woman, all right? But sad to see, some Jakes would prefer that, all right? Some Jakes would prefer a woman that's going to be strong-minded, voice their opinion, very opinionated, and look to be combative, all right? And you have to ask yourself, what type of mind frame of Jake or just in general of a man that has to have that type of mindset that want to be combative with a woman. All right. So nevertheless, this is the book of Proverbs chapter 21 and verse 9. It reads, it is better to dwell in a corner of the housetop than with a brawling woman in a wide house. Right. And as was stated earlier, this is a multi-millionaire young fellow in his early 20s, all right, who could have a mansion or a wide house, but he would much rather prefer a feminine or quiet woman, okay, which is why he says he will not dwell or salaki, which is why he said he will not deal with an American woman. And we know what that American woman is or entails if he's comparing them to an NBA YoungBoy, all right, a so-called black woman, okay? Because although he hasn't been here long enough to know, he knows, okay? He knows, all right? So is that saying 100% of the so-called black woman is what you would call quote-unquote dateable? No, but a vast majority, let's just say, for reference, 99.9999%, okay? It's always that slim chance, but more than likely, you will be better off erring on the side of caution, okay? All right, just dealing with women in general, but especially the so-called black women. All right, because she's been lifted up with so much pride that she can't be approached and be above reproof. All right, you can't tell her nothing. All right, this is her kingdom because why? It's tied alongside with the serpent Esau Edom. So when he falls, she's going to fall. All right. So this is why we say it's better off you going to deal with another woman from another nation. All right. Or if you're dealing with an Israelite woman, consider a Northern Kingdom woman. But it ain't too much better with them either. All right. Because they one step below the so-called black women. All right. So brothers that are patiently waiting, we continuing to wait for the Lord when that moment presents itself to give us that woman. All right. Which we know, or we speculate that if we get a woman, it may be during the time of Jacob's trouble. All right. But hey, if the brother's dealing with a woman, he deal with her. Okay. It's on him. All right. Whether he want to deal with her in the capacity of a wife or a concubine. All right. But if you're dealing with another nation, as far as the women from other nations, you just treat them and deal with them as concubines. All right. Because that's basically what they are anyways. All right. Just a bunch of concubines. All right. Which is all they're going to be in the kingdom. All right. See, when our women come back in the kingdom, they'll be in their right mind. But as far as this side, on this side of the kingdom, in this captivity, they too far gone. All right. To try to rehabilitate them. Okay. Because why? You can't rehabilitate them anyways. All right. So it says, it is better to dwell in a corner of the housetop. Right. The best thing you can do is just to, look to get along with them. All right. Get you a little piece of space. That's why, it's best to have your own. All right. If you got your own crib, your own spot, deal with it. Keep your own spot and deal with her at her spot, man. You may go over there, smash, and go back home, man. All right. But now it's not the time to be trying to, start a family. Now, if you got a family, cool. But, we getting closer to the time of this thing coming to an end. All right. So it says, it is better to dwell in a corner of the housetop of the housetop than with a brawling woman in a wide house. Right. Because that brawling woman, she's coming with that masculine energy. You can't tell me this. You can't tell me that. I ain't gonna cook. I ain't gonna clean. I just work 10 hours. You see? But she don't give that type of lip or attitude to her so-called white counterpart boss man, Mr. George or Jeffrey. No. You see? So I just find it quite interesting that a 21, 22-year-old, seems to have the world at the palm of his hand, could see that, hey, I don't deal with American women. And he left it up to your imagination to figure out what type of American women he's referring to. And then to give you more of a clue, he used the analogy of comparing them to an NBA young boy. All right. Because if you ever listen to NBA young boy music, he's one of those rappers that rap like their voice is being muffled. All right. Almost like Lil Baby and Young Thug. All right. So that's pretty much how they view the so-called black woman, just yipping and yapping. It don't make no sense, man. When the best thing they could do is just keep that trap closed, man. All right. But hey, that's way too much to hope and expect for on this side. That's why we just riding this out, Lord willing, until the end. All right. Let's see if there's another proverb. Verse 7 and 11. It reads, she is loud and stubborn. These are all traits specifically given to the woman of westernization. All right. The so-called black woman for the most part. All right. Because you can't tell her nothing. It says she is loud and stubborn. Her feet abide not in her house. Right. She's always on the move. She's always trying to, go and up and pack her bags and let's go to a vacation. Let's go travel. Let's go somewhere. instead of, maintaining and managing the house, okay? But that's all to be expected given this level of what she believes to be independency, okay? Especially with, quote unquote divas like Beyonce and Sierra and whoever else, especially back in the 2000s that was pushing that, put a ring on it, all my independent ladies. This is the results of that, okay? When them themselves would never take the advice that they were pushing out through their music, all right? Because why? You see Sierra, she's settled down. Her feet is at the house, all right? You see Beyonce, she's settled down. Her feet is in the house. But see, the results or the product of what they, song back then is manifesting now, okay? From the women then and then the offspring of those women, all right? So like I said earlier, I just find it, interesting that a young so-called, black man, because his father is a so-called black man, if I'm not mistaken, and his mother is a so-called white woman, all right? But I find it interesting that even he, not even 25 years of age, can identify just how what's the word I'm looking for? Just how incooperative or uncooperative the so-called black woman is, man. All right? So, that's going to be pretty much about it. Just wanted to bring that out. Found it interesting. And we're going to go ahead and close out. This is the book of 1 Peter chapter 5 and verse 8. It reads, be sober, be vigilant. And part of that sobriety and being vigilant is guarding your peace, okay? Even if it means you got to stay in a small 1-bedroom, 400 square foot studio or whatever, you got to guard your peace, which is what? Your mind, all right? A woman, hey, if you ain't dealing with the Lord properly, a woman could be a distraction, all right? Could get you off your square, all right? That's why you got to guard your peace of mind, with all, with all sobriety, all right? You got to guard your peace of mind with all, pretty much with all this word, all right? So it says, be sober, be vigilant, because your adversary, the devil, as a roaring lion, walketh about seeking whom he may devour, or she may devour, all right? Because as it says, her hands is as snares, all right? She's looking to trap you up, man, all right? For you to be a servant of hers, all right? That's why she's calling herself a queen. There's no other race of people on earth that refers to themselves as queens as the so-called black women that I've come across, that I've seen. I'm a queen. So in that sense or regard, a queen needs servants or a servant. And who do you think she's coming to get? You so-called black men. All right? Because why? No other race wants to deal with them. All right? No other race in a right mind wants to deal with them. Okay? So be sober, be vigilant, because your adversary, the devil, as a roaring lion, walketh about seeking whom, or in this case, she may devour. All right? So with that being said, we're going to go ahead and close out and conclude the lesson. And with that being said, pray someone was edified through this lesson. And until the next time, if it be the Lord's will, stay strong, stay in the faith. We're almost home. Shalom. Peace.